Thank you for joining us on the Alt Funds podcast. This is Skylar Steinke. I'm here with my co-host, Mike Schroeder. And today we are speaking with Mike Collins. Mike is a powerhouse in the entrepreneurial and venture capital landscape, known for turning bold concepts into massive realities. Long before he democratized startup investing, he founded Big Idea Group, a pioneering firm that bridged the gap between independent garage investors and global corporate giants, eventually catching the strategic eye of marketing titan WPP. Today, he's the founder and CEO of Alumni Ventures and one of the most active venture capital firms in the world, managing billions in assets and making institutional grade startups accessible to individual investors. Welcome, Mike, to the show.
Great to be here, Skylar. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Well, great. This is going to be a fun conversation. Love to kind of start off maybe just with your background, your journey to where you're at to this point, and we'll get into Alumni and some other conversations about the Big Idea Group and other things as far as that goes as well.
Yeah, I actually started in venture capital in 1986, to age myself a little bit. A very different era. And it was with a Boston-based venture firm called TA Associates. And really my entire career I was really lucky. I found kind of that intersection of what I really liked and I found interesting and what I was good at and what the world would pay me to do pretty early. And so that's really lucky. And so my entire career has really been as a believer in technology and innovation and entrepreneurship and building things. I went to Harvard Business School and met a guy named Clayton Christensen, who became a good friend, really impacted how I view the world, really kind of, created, I think, probably the most important framework for thinking about disruption and innovation of, my lifetime. And really about 15 years ago, decided that I really felt a couple of things. One, that venture capital is a really important asset class and I think this has really been proven out and kind of irrefutable in the last year, that just enormous amounts of value are being created in the private markets. And that it was really, really hard for individuals to put together a good venture portfolio. That it was really an industry from the 1950s on, really designed for very clubby, very institutional. My old firm came out of a kind of a Boston, elite family office organization called Tucker Anthony, and again from the 60s. And so the industry is really, and there's obviously regulatory restrictions that are still in existence and kind of crazy, that basically says you can go on Kalshi and bet on anything, or you can go to Vegas and put $100,000 on red, but you can't put $10,000 into a Khosla-led startup. Kind of nuts, right?
Right.
But I said, I have a unique perspective, unique background. I'm gonna try to see if I can help. And so I started Alumni Ventures with the idea of we could do better together than any of us could do alone. I started out with my alma mater, Dartmouth, and then, it has really grown from there. We've brought together, tens of thousands of individuals. We've invested in 1,700 portfolio companies. We were ranked by Inc. and CB Insights and others as kind of now top 20 VC firm. Our strategy is a little unique in that we really were designed from the ground up for individuals, and that we co-invest really alongside kind of name recognized VCs. So we don't lead rounds, we don't go on boards, but we do the same deal that Andreessen does, or that Benchmark or Lightspeed does. And we get in the deals because the founders basically love our network, and that network can help them, find new customers, introductions into kind of strategic partnerships, help them raise money because we don't lead. We can introduce them, to everybody that might lead their B round. So we have kind of a unique niche within the venture industry. And, we've just been kind of grinding it out, building the business. And now we're really going global, Skylar. We opened up an office in Tokyo and in London. We just closed our first Japan-US bridge fund with some large institutional Japanese investors. So we want to take the network that we built around alumni groups and in the United States and really make it a global network of portfolio companies, individual investors, corporate partnerships. And that just makes us even more valuable to the entrepreneur who is trying to build a difference-making company. So yeah, that's where we are in our journey, and I'll shut up and let you
Yeah,
guys ask.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I love just to ask on just on the back of that. You mentioned the network, the community. I mean, how has that changed over time, and how do you think about the community in the VC space right now?
Yeah. So, I think in a world, obviously we're in an AI super cycle, right? These technologies of the personal computer, the internet, biotech, they disrupt, right? And obviously AI is a new big disruptive technology. We can talk more about what we can anticipate happening there, but it's a big new technology. Everybody knows that. Um, but in our worlds, um, we actually think it's an incredible investment opportunity. We think it's also amplifying our ability as alumni ventures to do more and to do better work. Um, but at the same time, we believe fundamentally that there are very strong human desires that are not going away. And so, for example, we have probably the best venture education system in the world where people can, yes, go online, self serve, they can attend webinars online, but we also do those in real life. So, we believe in real life stuff. And community is probably even more this kind of blend about a big global community with a very small high touch world that we're building. And we think that that is what people want. They still want human connections. They don't necessarily want to be on a kind of a robo customer service call. They want to talk to, I don't know about you, but
Right,
like talk to human, talk to human, talk to human, please. Right.
right,
And so
right,
Always.
yeah. So when it comes to, investing, a lot of it now is just, oh, for public companies, I'm going to buy, ETFs and a few individual names, and I'm just going to go on Fidelity and do it. And it is very um, uninteresting, frankly, if it's, done the right way. And, the thing about venture capital is a lot of those same principles apply, but it can be a lot more fun and a lot more interesting because the companies because it's frankly just more uncertain. And, you might want a portfolio of, you think you want a portfolio of 100, 200 public companies. Well, I argue you should have a portfolio of 100 or 200 venture companies if you're going to do it the right way as well, which is
yeah,
really, really hard unless you're working with, somebody that is getting you access to a large volume of high quality venture deals. But if you can do that, you know, getting together with 15 people and like, hey, what could go right here? What could go wrong? What are the key issues? It's fun. It's fun and interesting, and it keeps you young and relevant to look at deals. I just think it is the elixir of longevity of like learn something new today.
I love it.
yeah.
Mike, take us back. Take us back to 2000 when you started the Big Ideas Group. What specific gap or friction point did you see in the market, and kind of what made this company come to life?
Yeah, I mean, Big Idea Group was really a pretty simple idea. It was the idea that good ideas can come from anywhere. And, it was really kind of Shark Tank before Shark Tank. And, going around and hearing pitches for products, for businesses, um, was really the idea. And I think from the product standpoint, we were probably a little ahead of our time. Um, but it really created the memory and the muscle to create Alumni Ventures, because it's really underneath it all, it is still the idea that great entrepreneurs are everywhere. You need to get a lot of pitches, you pick a very few number of deals, and then you really try to add value, right? And it's a power law. So much of investing, even even if you look at the results of like a Warren Buffett or most people, it's a very small percentage of really good decisions that make all the difference. And in the venture world, that is even more extreme. You can lose one time your money, and you do often in venture capital, but you can also make 20, 50, 100 times your money or more, right? And it only takes a few of those that to really make a difference. And so you just have to think about it as, how do I develop a high quality portfolio and stick with it and just play for the home runs? This is really what the venture game is. And while every individual investment we make, we love and we think there's a tremendous upside, the data just says, in a portfolio of 100 companies, half of them aren't going to do very well. And maybe a quarter will do okay. And then 15 will do well. And then 5 or 10 will just make all the difference in the world. And I just think that that's an important thing to understand about venture capital. And it's frankly a good life lesson, which is, I was at my 40th reunion last weekend and talking to a Midas Touch venture investor who's retiring, and I was saying, like, hey, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your career? And he goes, yeah, I passed on the A round of SpaceX. So in our world, it's not the deals you
Whoops.
do. It's not the deals you do
Yeah.
that fail. It's the deals you don't do that turn out to be, 1,000x, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, this is a mentality that's a little bit different than some other asset classes, like buying your home, right? You don't want your home that you buy as an asset to go to zero, right? So you're going to be very thoughtful. You're going to be very conservative. You're going to hopefully build it to enjoy it. But venture capital is very much kind of portfolio theory, power law theory. And the other thing I think that is changed since I founded the company, Mike, is so many more companies now are staying private longer. And actually, the number of public companies is, flat or declining. And, there's a lot of very smart, rational entrepreneurs who are saying, I'm in no rush to go public, that I can raise money privately. I can take care of my employees through secondaries. I can take care of my early investors through secondaries or working them into my next round of financing. And, I don't need the expense. I don't need the grief of, a 28-year-old analyst, giving me crap about something that is not going to pay off in the next 3 months, but might take a year or two. Right. So, yeah, thank you very much. I'll stay private. And so, I don't know, there's like 1,500 companies now that are private, worth more than a couple $1 billion, that are, that clearly have product market fit. They have, revenues. A lot of them are profitable, but they're just saying, yeah, I feel really good just staying as a private company right now. And
Let's
so,
yeah.
you end up with, if your starting point for your equity portfolio is, and it's limited to just public companies, you're not only missing out on the venture bucket, you're missing out on this, what I call the late stage private bucket, which are companies like Anthropic and, just you know, uh, Anduril and Supabase and all these companies that are just, really remarkable companies, but you can't buy them, So right now the public is kind of the end of the station kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think is the biggest friction there?
I think it's I think it is we've created an environment from a regulatory perspective primarily that is created a lot of burden and expense to be a public company. And yeah, I don't think it's likely to change. I don't think I think there could be some things done from a regulatory perspective, but here's what's gone on is all of the big capital sources have been moving to, you don't raise $50 billion from VCs alone, right? You have to go to sovereign wealth, you have to go to big players, you have to, uh, so institutions have jumped from public only to they're doing deals in these late stage private companies. And so again, the choice you have as an individual investor is to say, okay, I am going to play in this increasingly end of the road public realm only, which for some people is fine. Um, but know that you're missing out on just where most of the value is being created now. It's being created in technology. It's being created with private companies, right? So the entry point, I don't know, of SpaceX was $1.7 trillion or 2 trillion or something like that. Well, that's $2 trillion that went to not individuals, right? Yeah,
Right.
and you're going to have other companies like Anthropic and OpenAI, and there will be some IPOs for sure, but it's not people's first choice. And it's again, just put yourself into an entrepreneur's shoes. It's like it kind of, okay, now I'm going to get sued. Now I'm going to, deal with all this cost. I've got these quarterly reports I've got to spend all this time for. The market is very short-term oriented. This is, I think, more of a societal perspective, which is, you know, um, again, you have a bad quarter and you get crushed, right? Kind of thing. So it's like if you look at the history of like, a great company like Amazon, ups and downs, long journey, right? And you had to do it because of you needed the capital. So you had to deal with it. But now you have a choice. You can get the capital privately and without the pain in the ass factor, people are taking it. Like I'm just observing. I'm not defending the system at all. My job is, this is the world, these are the rules we play with. How can I help individuals develop a portfolio of late stage private companies? And how can I help them have a venture portfolio? Because I would argue there's actually three buckets for equities: public, late stage private, which are these 1,500 companies that earlier in my career, those would all be public, right? Those companies, Anduril would be public, right? Just
Yeah.
would be, right? In previous days. And plus our world, which is the chance to get into those kind of companies where they're less proven, the prices are much lower, but you have the opportunity to make just, enormous multiples. But if you're going to do that, you need to understand it's a long-term illiquid asset class. So no, you can't say, oh, I don't want to do venture capital today because I'm buying a boat. Like you can call up your broker and sell some Nvidia stock to buy your boat if you want. But with private companies, you're kind of in for the long term. And frankly, I think that's
Almost
probably
better in a lot of cases, right?
that class has done well over the last 50 years is it keeps humans from, buying high and selling low. which is kind of we're biologically wired to do. So you're kind of and it's one of the reasons that, retirement funds do better, because people don't look at them every 5 minutes on their phone, right? Kind of thing. I was talking to a large money manager, and we were talking about segmenting customers, and he says, one thing we found out, our best customers are a surprising group. They're dead. It is because, Aunt Tilly owns some stock, and, it was 3 years before the kids in the estate figured out she owned it. So it's just been growing, in Aunt Tilly's account for long periods of time, but Aunt Tilly is long gone. So it's just like, and this is, again, I think some of the great investors of all times have found ways to kind of turn off that part of their brain, which is short-term oriented. They get to fundamentals, they create habits, and then they're largely buy and hold people, right?
Set it and forget it.
So set it and forget it. And that, if you go into a venture portfolio, you're kind of stuck for 5 or 10 years. And so, the winners are going to win, the losers are going to lose, but you're not going to time it wrong, kind of things.
Yeah, we take the emotion out of it, right?
That point of it. And oh, by the way, it's kind of fun and interesting to back, a really cool team that's, doing something interesting, and then seeing, the winners are way more fun than the losers bother you. So, we're investors in a wearable company, Aura, and we were in the pre-seed round, and, everybody thought wearables were crowded and couldn't work, and Apple Watch was, the player there. But there have been several wearables that have actually worked, and that was one that has turned out to be, a really good company. And so, again, here's the other thing, which is it's all them. It's not the investor, right? The investor in venture capital is along for the ride. And, great VCs that lead rounds and great. But Uber is great because the team at Uber built a great company, not because you happen to invest in it. And even if you sat on the board, my lived experience is boards have an equal chance of doing harm to a venture as they are to help them, right? And so the really, really good VCs are really betting on the founding team, and just like really, really bend over backwards to support them, see them through pivots, really. And not that there are times where, the team needs some help and some different skills on the team, but, the really good VCs are very founder friendly. You're betting on it. You're betting on someone who views something very differently from the rest of the world. That's how you create amazing companies, and you support them. And that's what we try to do as co-investors. It's like, we tell a founder, we're not your lead. That's like getting married, right? We're like your favorite uncle, and we leave you alone. But if we can help, call us, and we will move mountains to try to use our network to help you. But at the end of the day, you're gonna succeed or fail as an entrepreneur. So that's kind of our little bleeding in there, Mike.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. Let's use this time. Let's talk about the your model. So you guys invested over $1.5 billion with over 11,000 investors, which is incredible. Talk to us a little bit about this aspect, and how you guys accomplished this, and how you think about getting all these investors in the door.
Yeah, it's education, right? And obviously we started with people that were already had strong affinities, which is, if you happen to go to the same school in the United States, I mean, just watch Saturday afternoons in the fall, and there's enormous bonding in the United States in particular around, colleges. And it's also an obvious nexus of entrepreneurship, right? MIT alums have they know their classmates are building amazing companies, right? So building around the affinity and the network with the very simple story of venture capital is important. If you agree, we've created a really easy way for you to participate, which is, come into one of our alumni funds and we pool money together and we invest in tier one VC deals. And then we went through the phase, Mike, of like, well, I didn't go to one of these schools, right? But I'd like venture capital too. So we created our foundation fund, which is open to anyone. And frankly, we opened up like our alumni funds. You don't have to go to Stanford to invest in our Stanford fund. Most of those people do. But and then people said, I want to do what I do with public stocks here. So I want a diversified fund, but I really believe in health tech. So can you do a health tech fund? So we now have 11 focus funds, which are kind of the equivalent of a focused mutual fund with public equities. And then 3 or 4 years ago, we really said, hey, we get into these deals and some people want to really lean into a particular name. They go, oh, I wear the Aura ring. I'd love to own some stock in it. That'd be fun at Thanksgiving to kind of talk about that I'm an investor in this company. Can I put some individual names in my portfolio as well? So we also offer that. We offer, not every deal do we have the time. Sometimes there's confidentiality. But sometimes
These would be like SPVs or
SPVs. So we'll write one check to the company and it'll be a blend of some of our diversified funds, some of our focus funds, and some individual people that want to write an individual check. So we have customers who just want to pick individual names. We have customers who like, just give me diversified fund and let me get back to life. And then there's a lot of people that do what they do with their public portfolios. They have a little bit of both. They have an index fund. They have I'm going to have an international fund. I'm going to have a commodity fund. I'm going to have a REIT. And here's 5 or 10 names that I just really love. And so we have tried, and it's taken us 10 years to be able to offer that in an easy way because nobody had done this. So we had to build it all ourselves. But yeah, that's what we can offer now. And it really just starts with a phone call to us, which is, talk to us. Where are you in your journey? How much do you understand? Do you start with education? Great. We'll help educate you. And then you want to dip your toe in the water, start looking at a few individual deals. Maybe you just want a good diversified fund and start there. Different people have different needs, just like they do with any asset class. So it really just starts with having a good partner who can talk you through it. And, I do think that this is something that we pride ourselves on as being good listeners. And then, just explaining what we have. And then, between, people knowing what they want and then people just saying, hey, Claude, this is who I am. This is who I am. These are my goals. This is my budget. How do you think I should allocate my portfolio? And then, riff with AI. It's really good at that. It doesn't judge you. It gives you ideas. You can, there's obviously, if you design the prompt right, there's no biases there. So I encourage people to get educated, talk to people, use AI to kind of create, to be a tool to help you with your portfolio in alts and publics and all of that. It's a good partner to riff with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess going back to what you mentioned about, proper diversification for an investor and 50 to 100 VC companies, how do you make that achievable at scale for the investor or for the individual?
Yeah, so we have 130 employees. We have 8 offices. We have 40 full-time venture capitalists broken up into 10 teams who basically get up every day and do deals, right? So those people are in essence working for the heart surgeon in Des Moines, right? And, what we tell people is the one thing we can't do for you is allocate annually. So if you have $100,000 for this asset class, if you and Claude have said, okay, this is where I want to start, $100,000 a year, I would say, whatever your budget is, spread it out over 4 years. And then each of our funds is 20 to 30 companies. Okay. So if you do a diversified fund a year, and just like that, I'm going to put 25 grand a year into 4 of these diversified funds, either our foundation fund, or if you're an alumni of one of our schools, that'll give you 100 companies. That is a really good start, right? So that would be what I would tell my brother. If you were just like, I don't care about this stuff, I get the idea, where do I start? That is kind of the no-brainer solution. And again, all of our deals, you would look through and say, okay, this is a legitimate Series A led by, Lightspeed, and that is really probably the other hack. There is a big difference between what I call professional venture deals and what your golf buddy might show you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you do that because it's fun and it's your nephew's startup. And I do that stuff too, but that for me is in a different bucket than my hardcore build wealth investment. For hardcore build wealth, I'm very serious about it. And it's like, I have an annual allocation to venture capital that fits me and my family. And I personally split it equally between diversified funds, a few focus funds, and some individual names where I just love the team or love the concept. And yeah, I invest too because it's fun and interesting, because otherwise you lose interest, right? If investing isn't holding your attention. And this is why, the math says for public equities, just buy an index fund and go away. But that's so boring, right?
That's right.
For my friends, I say, that should be the bulk of it, but save 10% of it, 20% of it, where you just are kind of thinking you're smarter than everybody else. Okay. That's totally fine. And maybe you are, and maybe you aren't, and maybe you're lucky, maybe you're not, but that 90% of your public portfolio is done the right way, right? Which is low cost index funds. And then the other stuff is for fun and it keeps your interest. Fun and interest is a good thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess on that point, Mike, when people do look to, go direct into a venture capital opportunity, what are the most common mistakes they do make, in that regard?
They don't do enough deals. So they just do a random deal once in a while. And frankly, you should ask yourself, why, if this deal is so amazing, why am I getting access to it? Right? Because again, this is where I was 14 years ago when I founded Alumni Ventures, which is, I was in the business. I was connected. My friends were, really strong players. And it was just so much work to put together a venture portfolio that I was like, I could either do this, 20 hours a week and just grind it out. But who wants to do that, kind of thing I've got a life, right? So I go, if I can't do it, cause so to answer your question, Skylar, it's, they don't do enough deals. And 2, they don't get a portfolio of what I call the professional grade venture deals, right? So it's both a quantity and quality problem. And then they end up doing some crappy little non-institutional deal and it goes to zero and they go like, oh, this sucks. This doesn't work. This isn't a good investment strategy for me. And if you do it like that, yes, that's gambling in essence, right?
Yeah.
And so and here is the other thing that I just would want your listeners to understand is the great venture capital firms, these names like Lightspeed and Coastline and Andreessen and Sequoia, et cetera. There's a couple hundred really high quality ones that they just do better. And the reason is because if you're a really good founder who has an amazing company, you have your choice of venture capitalists. And you're running a beauty contest, an auction with top tier VCs. It's like if you're LeBron James and a senior in high school, you have your choice of which college you want to go to, right? It's not because the coach at college X is that much better than every other coach. It's because LeBron James is going to Duke because it's a branding opportunity for him. And that analogy holds for an entrepreneur. I'm bringing in A16Z to lead my A round because that is going to help me raise my B round. That is going to help me recruit amazing employees. That's going to actually even help me with customers and strategic partnerships. So it's not the guys and gals working at A16Z are just that much smarter than everybody else. It's because they've a tremendous brand, and raising money for an entrepreneur is a branding event. So the correlation is there. It is not causal, right? So our kind of trick was pull people together, go to the entrepreneur and say, we have this amazing network, and have a rule that we're going to invest with those kinds of players. Because we know that it's like, Bessemer is leading their A round. We know the partner really knows this domain really well. They're going to do the vast, vast majority of the round. We're going to do a little tiny piece of it, but the entrepreneur is going to bring us in under the same terms and conditions because our network can help them, maybe as much as Bessemer can. Now, it's just two different relationships. It's the relationships between a spouse and, your extended family. We're definitely in the extended family pool. But again, for an individual, like that's kind of magic. For my 10 grand, 25 grand, I get access to these deals. That's why we've been so successful.
Yeah, definitely. The logo on the cap table is important, right? Getting into these deals.
Yeah.
You mentioned, talking about founders as well. What's just curious? You probably talked to thousands of founders over your career. What are some traits you now look for that you see in founders that you probably didn't appreciate early on, or what has changed there? What are some nuances that you look at when you talk to a lot of founders?
I think I've had greater appreciation over the years for people who really think different. As the venture industry itself has become more institutionalized and mainstream, and really there's a lot of like MBAs now within the venture industry. Those are kind of rule followers, get good grades, do the right things, get the right credential people. The truth is, a great founder is a little off. And one of Peter Thiel's favorite questions is, and I stole it, which is, what do you think the rest of the world has wrong? And a great founder will have an answer. And that's why they're all Steve Jobs. They think they think you're crazy, right? Because you really see something that you understand and can't understand why the rest of the world doesn't see it. But you see something very differently, because almost by definition, if you're going to build something that is amazing, like Airbnb or Square or SpaceX, people thought you were nuts. And, but you went and did it anyway. And so I would say it's that unique vision that's kind of like borderline maniacal grit would be the other thing that I would say, because you are going to deal with so much rejection, so much adversity. Listen, listeners can go Google this. Jensen, CEO of NVIDIA, somebody asked him a year or two ago, like, hey, if you were 25 again, what would you tell your 25-year-old self, right? That question. And he goes, don't start NVIDIA. Okay. And this is obviously one of the most valuable companies in on the planet in all of history. And he's like, if I only knew how hard and the ups and downs and the near bankruptcies and the sacrifice and the grief and so it just, if I'd have known that, I didn't know what would be involved. So it's like you just really need very gritty people that are just going to, and that, listen, it can come, this can come across as arrogance. This can come across as maniacal. We're in a company called Corgi, which is kind of an insurance tech company. And, their first giveaway, or the first thing I think our team gave the Corgi team, was we either gave them blankets or sleeping bags because they were just sleeping in the office, right? Kind of thing.
That's amazing.
And it was like, and they've kind of developed this reputation of like, they just want people that are just unreasonable in their commitment to building the company. And I was talking to one of our VCs this morning who was like at a European tech conference, and there was a panel and Corgi came up, and they're like, oh, this is not the way you want to, support your team. And, they don't believe in work-life balance at their company. And and he basically said, we're sitting here at a European tech conference and you're talking about this startup called Corgi. They won, right? Because you're talking about them. And oh, by the way, who do you think is knocking on the door to go join Corgi, to go work for them? Not the people who are, yeah, I want a job. They want people
It's the grinders.
They want grinders and people maybe at the point of their life is, I want to spend the next 5 years of my life going all in on my career and changing the world. Corgi sounds like that kind of place where I can grow, get unbelievable responsibility, work my ass off, and potentially make life-changing wealth. Their team is self-selected people that want that. And if you want other things in life, again, I don't think we at AV judge that. Corgi doesn't judge that. There are plenty of places in the world where you can go get that in our world. Go get it. But Corgi wants something else, and it wants people that want something else. And the fact that at a European tech conference, they're talking about Corgi's maniacal perspective on trying to build an AI insurance tech company, okay, different strokes.
100%.
Right.
I got this question's kind of loaded with two different threads here, but community is definitely a central part of your model. You guys also have recently opened offices in Tokyo and London. So talk to us about those. Why Tokyo and London? And how'd you pick them?
Well, one, we want to be where great founders are. And again, I think this is something that America should be, we've got our 250th anniversary here, and there's a lot of always issues in the world, but I think America has built the most incredible capitalist engine in the world, which I'll, as a shorthand, called Silicon Valley. The fact that you can take an Uber from San Francisco airport, or probably even ride a bike, and probably there's somewhere between 10 and 20 trillion dollars of market cap that has been created within that, Uber ride, is one, amazing. And two, it has now gone viral. That is not just great companies are being founded in Silicon Valley. They're being founded in Austin and Vancouver and Mexico City and in Kyoto and in Stockholm. Sweden is crushing it right now, which we all think of as kind of like a social safety net kind of environment. Well, look at the data. Look at how many amazing startups they're doing. They're doing something right. Okay. So my point being, we won. We don't have to, yes, we want Silicon, Utah, Silicon New England. Yes, but that's kind of already happening. Like New York is an incredible entrepreneurial ecosystem right now. There's amazing things going on again in Boston and in Minneapolis and, Utah and Austin. There's a bunch of places in Texas that are doing amazing mini Silicon Valleys. That's the driver. It's no secret. That's the driver of the capitalist system. And if you get out of the United States, and talk to people, they want two things. They want to build their own Silicon Valley. They want to they want their own tech stack. They want to control, they want that growth. They want their own sovereignty. And increasingly, if you're going to be a sovereign Japan, you better have a strategic defense program that's going to deal with AI and energy and defense tech. When you've got Russia, North Korea, and China at your doorstep, so they get it that their society. And listen, Japan was a great entrepreneurial society 50 to 100 years ago. But the founder of Samsung and Toyota are long, long gone. They need the next generation now. And so why Japan? Hardworking, great educational system, great infrastructure. You just need some juice and some cooperation from the private sector and the public sector to kind of make the ground a little more fertile for entrepreneurs, which they are committed to doing. And in Japan, there is much better cooperation between the public, the big companies, the government. They all work a little more cooperatively. And so when they decide that they're going to go create 100 unicorns in the next 10 years, don't bet against them, right? Kind of thing. And obviously we open up an office there 6 months later, Andreessen opened up an office there. So,
You're onto
great to have them there where, we want to do deals right and left with them. Great firm. But yeah, and so that is not only do we believe in Japan, but also our portfolio companies want access to their market. So we do demo day this November where 15 of our portfolio companies are going over there in areas of AI and energy and cyber, and they want to do business with these great Japanese companies, right? Robotics, and, they want partnerships. So it's like simultaneously every region, whether that's a well-informed region in the United States or a different part of the world, they want to build their own Silicon Valley. And two, they recognize that they need access to great technologies from around the world. You can't wait to build your own chip infrastructure to become more high tech. So you need to be on that stuff. So this whole, we're all going to be pockets of our own isolated technologies that's nonsense. So we need to be where great entrepreneurs are. We want to expand our network. That just enhances, Mike, our value proposition to the company we're going to talk to this afternoon. Hey, we see you're doing your A. We think we want to do 5% of it. Here's how we think we can help. That's realistic. It's this amazing network. Oh, you want to come to our demo day in, Norway? Great.
Oh, good. Awesome. I just had a quick question, Mike, just relative to AI. Obviously, we had a few different touch points there in this conversation. There's a lot of conversation around AI. Obviously, there's a lot of things happening in this space, which are very exciting.
Yeah.
That change a lot of things. There's also folks who are looking at it from a narrative of investment cycle that usually attracts too much capital.
Yeah.
Is there a bubble? Is this a genuine technology revolution? What does that look like from your lens?
Listen, I look at history. right? And again,
Yeah.
I think if you really study big technology waves, and this goes back, you should study like the advent of electricity in the United States, right? I think several things can be simultaneously true. One is this technology going to change everything? Every career, every company, and every society pretty profoundly? Yes. Will there will it take some time to diffuse throughout the world? Yeah, usually things get overestimated in the short term and underestimated in the long term. That's with electricity, that was with the microcomputer, that was with the internet, that was with the smartphone. Um, I think I think we should all try to avoid kind of it's the best thing ever. It's the end of the world. I think those extremes get you clicks and are buzzy, but history says not necessarily true. I so I would point to you really should um, understand that you want to lean into this technology wave, not try to time it. I think market over 40 years, I've learned predicting the future is very, very hard, and trying to time markets, good, you're usually chasing the last thing, right? So we try to look at it on a granular basis, and we pass on deals every day because we don't like the price. So when you make an investment in a public equity or a private equity, private company, price is always a factor. So it's like, in venture capital, you get every time the company raises, it's a fresh chance to decide, do I like this company? Do I like this company at this price? And when you do that kind of bottoms up analysis, like you should be doing if you're buying individual names of public companies, there are some companies you're going to say this is a reasonable risk adjusted return opportunity, or it's not. I do think I'll give you a couple more points on AI. You can fully anticipate backlash and unintended positive and negative outcomes, meaning who would have predicted Airbnb was a thing that was made possible because of the internet and the smartphone technology, right? Or Uber. So you don't know the good stuff that's going to come out of this. I think with AI, you can be very hopeful about disruptions in healthcare and in education and in material science and in all kinds of software building, for example, right? I think you're going to be able to do more with less is obvious. I think you can fully anticipate backlash. People don't like change. People will anecdotally point to, oh, look at this particular industry being hurt. We need to slow this down. This was the discussion or from the horse industry when the cars came along. And people chuckle at that now, but go read from that period of time, the people really trying to protect the horse industry and the dangers of cars, which are, by the way, real. And cars as a great new technology led to car accidents and drunk driving and urban sprawl. So there, with every great new technology, none of us want to give up automobiles. But, let's anticipate backlash from AI. Let's anticipate some amazing, great new things come to us that probably don't get as much publicity as the negative stuff. Like, take self-driving, right? So if you go to San Francisco, like Waymo taxis are everywhere now. You turn, and by the way, their safety record is way, way better than humans. So every city that says, no, we're going to protect the taxi drivers, statistically is probably costing lives. And that's just the cold statistics of it, right?
100%.
And like headlines of the New York Times will still be, look at Waymo got stuck in a cul-de-sac and took 5 minutes, and the poor fire truck had to kind of go up on the lawn to get around it. Like, that's like headline news, not
Right.
not the 12 people that were killed by taxi drivers yesterday doing crazy ass shit and hitting, that's just like a given now. 40,000 Americans die every year in automobile accidents. That's not newsworthy. The one Tesla that, goes off the road and leaps into flames, that's like, oh, look at Tesla. God, we got to stop these self-driving cars. Look how scary they are.
Yeah.
So it's like, I just think these things are, things are just the way the world is. Bad news leads, but my life experience is on net. These things create more jobs. Like when I went to college, I'm old. None of the jobs my classmates built their career on existed in 1986. Just there was no internet, there was no smartphone, there was no personal computer, there was no, again, I'm aging myself, but the world comes up with new cool things to go do with cool new technologies. And like, listen, we've had AI now for a few years. I don't know. There's all the job data says, there is pretty good employment in the world right now. And there's as many people, can't get enough people as, are struggling. Like I know at our firm, we're hiring and we're actually hiring young because, and there's this whole narrative about like young college graduates, like apply here because we're hiring them because we love them. They're hungry. They're AI native. They like building stuff. And they they went through college with AI. So they're like, oh, new release of Fables out today. Awesome. What more can I go build? What do you need to have built? Like, so I'll just speak from what I see statistically, what I see in the venture world. It's an amazing time to be an investor. I started out, there was like 3 industries that were investable. Now it's like space, nuclear, quantum, Hollywood's getting disrupted. Healthcare's getting disrupted. I mean, it's like, one of our portfolio, Function Health, is like, oh, I get more data from Function Health and my scans and my blood work and AI than I ever got from my doctor. So now
very true.
Now I meet with my doctor and it's like, okay, here's my data. Here's what AI says. What do you think? Let's have a plan together. Totally different dynamic. So that's exciting because healthcare has sucked. It's been bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
Anyway, I got
100%.
Story. Great questions. Great conversation. Yeah. If people want to think about venture capital, av.vc, come learn more.
Yeah, we got one final question for you, if you will, Mike. What does the future of VC look like in your eyes?
Yeah, I think the future of VC is AI powered human relationships. So I think it's one of these industries that is fundamentally a service industry, which means it's about human relationships. But underneath that, there's a lot of AI that will facilitate analysis and portfolio monitoring and customer service and helping make connections between people who can create value together. But at the end of the day, you want to have a very high touch. Building a business is a very high touch job still. And so I think I view it as kind of the future is a high touch surface over a very high tech wrapper, which is, I think, a lot of businesses are going to be moving that way.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. Mike, this has been so much fun. Really appreciate you sharing your perspectives with us, sharing all your insights. Where could we send people to learn, more about Alumni Ventures and get connected with you?
Yeah, super easy. Just go to av.vc. And, we got a lot of people that's their jobs is to talk to folks. So, yeah, talk to us.
Awesome. That's great. Well, we appreciate the time, Mike. We'll make sure to include all your info in the show notes. And again, great conversation today.